Aloha mai kako. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Brianna Govea, Program Specialist at the King Kamehameha V Judiciary History Center. While the remarks shared tonight don't necessarily represent opinions of the judiciary, I'd like to thank Chief Justice Mark Rechtenwald, the Hawaii State Judiciary, and the legislature for their continued support of our mission and for providing a space for this discussion. Tonight's program honors Kanaka involved in the civil struggle to preserve Hawaiian sovereignty at the end of the 19th century. In 1897, the Hui Aloha ʻāina a Navahe convened a meeting in Hilo, Hawaii, urging Hawaiians to protest US annexation. Miriam Michelson, an American journalist known for supporting suffrage causes and addressing gender and political issues, attended and detailed the event in her article, Strangling Hands Upon a Nation's Throat. The one-act play, Ka Lei Maile Aliʻi, The Queen's Women, written by Helen Edyth Malie Lincoln Lee Kwai, known fondly as Didi, retells the story of this gathering, at the heart of which were the Kūʻē petitions. Over 20,000 signatures were collected, and we're excited to share images of them with you today. This reimagining of Ka Lei Maile Aliʻi would not be possible without our programming partners, Aiko Yamashiro, Director of the Hawaii Council for the Humanities, and Hailiʻōpua Baker, who we'll hear from a little bit later today, Kumu of Hana Keaka, the Hawaiian Theatre Program at the University of Hawaiʻi at Mānoa. They have both dedicated many months to seeing this project come to fruition. I also want to mahalo Hailey for her work in casting and directing this virtual adaptation. And although she couldn't join us today, we have to recognize the amazing community leader, activist, and retired professor, Dr. Lynette Cruz, whose group Hui Aloha ʻāina o Ka Lei Maile Aliʻi has traveled the islands, bringing the original production to life for 2 decades. So very grateful for all the voices involved in this mo'olelo over the years and for everyone who has helped make this program today happen. A friendly reminder that this webinar is being recorded and it will be posted on the Judiciary History Center's YouTube channel. At the end of the webinar, before we move to a closed meeting format, for those who would like to continue tonight's discussion, there will be time to speak with the panelists, and I encourage our attendees to either use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screens to send in your questions, or use the raise hand function, and I'll turn audio on so you can directly address the group. Now I'd like to turn it over to Aiko to share a little bit more about the Why It Matters Civic and Electoral Participation Initiative, as well as our intent for this program this evening.
Mahalo, Brianna. Aloha, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Aiko Yamashiro. I'm Executive Director of Hawaii Council for the Humanities. We're so proud and excited to be a part of this program. Right now, it's like the curtain going up and folks have been working in their homes and bringing all of these stories together and connecting like hundreds of years ago and bringing all of these genealogies of civic engagement into right now. So really excited. So much work went into this and so many different kupuna and lives and creativity and mana like went into this production tonight. And so we're really, really excited to share it with you. So please get familiar with the chat. We do definitely want to have folks be able to ask questions and respond. And before we jump in, I'm just going to say mahalo to a bunch of folks who helped to make this happen. First of all, we're really grateful to our funders for this civic engagement project. So mahalo to the Mellon Foundation and the Federation of State Humanities Councils for sponsoring this local programming. And the initiative is called Why It Matters. So across 46 states and territories, humanities councils are helping to explore civic engagement and civic participation. And I think here in Hawaii, we're doing it in a really powerful way that spans generations and spans time. I'm gonna put a link in the chat for all of you folks if you would like to learn more about the Why It Matters initiative and all the different Aloha ʻāina components, youth voices, and educational events that are happening because of it. Also, we have to really mahalo nui to the Judiciary History Center, especially the program specialist, Brianna Govea. They cleaned the house, they made the house ready. They have been working tirelessly on this program for months. And they are just such a wonderful organization dedicated to such deep, rich educational programming. So we're really proud to be a part of it today. Mahalo again to the Hana Keaka Hawaiian Theatre Program for your innovative and epic productions. So much mana creating and sharing. Again, to the Hui Aloha ʻāina Ka Lei Maile Aliʻi. And Dr. Lynette Cruz was unable to join us tonight, but we do have a member, Emilia Kandagawa, who'll be able to speak and share a little bit about their community work later this evening. And last but not least, mahalo to all our ancestors who brought us here today, who made history, and who teach us that we can make history too. And that's why we're here together. So just a real quick overview of our evening. We're going to start with some sharing of mo'olelo by historian and honored guest, Dr. Noinoe Silva, and that will happen in just a second. Then we're going to view the featured event, view this new adaptation of Ka Lei Maile Aliʻi, which I'm beginning to think it's so much at once. It's a reenactment, it's a portal, it's a play, it's a film, it's a lot. And so we're going to get to see that. And then we're going to get to talk together with Dr. Silva, as well as more honored guests, with Director and Kumu Hailiʻōpua Baker, with member of Hui Aloha ʻāina o Ka Lei Maile Aliʻi, Emilia Kandagawa, and with a few of the cast members, Kuipulau Makani Olono and Hi'ilani Kim Dela Cruz Okimura. So really excited that we have so many honored guests to be able to share their thoughts. And then afterwards, how this play is often shared in community, and when it's shared in community, it feels important to be able to be together and to talk about how folks are feeling and to share what comes up. So afterwards, we're gonna do something different. We're gonna put a link in the chat, and I'm gonna put it in now, but don't click there because then you're gonna leave. So don't click on it. You can save it. But I'm going to put a link in the chat, and afterwards, what we're going to do, Hawaii Council for the Humanities, we're just going to host a room for a little while for folks if you want to talk a little bit more and share your thoughts and see who else is here, because I know over 100 folks signed up today. If you want to just be with folks for a little bit and talk about what we got to experience together, we're going to open that room for that community sharing session, totally optional. So I'm going to share that link now, but again, don't click there. You're going to get disappeared. Stay with us now, and I'm going to turn it back to you, Brianna, to introduce the next part of the program.
Thank you, Aiko. So I'm very excited to introduce Dr. Noinoe Silva, who's going to be sharing a special presentation with us. She is an author and assistant professor of political science at the University of Hawaiʻi at Mānoa, where she teaches courses on Olelo Hawaii and Hawaiian and Indigenous politics. She's contributed immensely to Hawaii scholarship with her books Aloha Betrayed, Native Hawaiian Resistance to American Colonialism, and The Power of the Steel-Tipped Pen, Reconstructing Native Hawaiian Intellectual Histories. And in the late 90s, Noinoe's research led her to locate and retrieve copies of the Kūʻē petitions from the National Archives in Washington, D.C. So I'm so grateful she's here with us right now. And without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to her.
Mahalo e Brianna. Aloha nui kākou e ku'upo e hoa aloha ʻāina mai kaikina ka lā ma haʻe a hiki kona velona ma lehua aloha kākou. First, mahalo nui to the organizers of this event, especially Brianna Govea and Aiko Yamashiro for all their work, and everybody else whose hands have put this together, and nui ka mahalo ya Lynette Cruz and the Hui Aloha ʻāina o Ka Lei Maile Aliʻi, and to Hailey Baker and the Halau Hana Keaka and everybody else who put this all together for this evening. I also have to say mahalo nui to Hau'oli Lorenzo Elarco, who helped me with my PowerPoint. So I'm really honored to participate this evening, and I do so with very fond memories of my dear friend, Didi Lee Kwai, who wrote and directed the original version of this play. So I'm going to try to share my screen now. Okay, so this play presents a moment in the lives of two women leaders of Hui Aloha o Wāhine, Kuaihelani Campbell and Emma Aima Nāwahī, as well as a moment, an important moment in the ongoing movement of Aloha ʻāina, love for our land, our country, and our lahui. Everything that you'll hear the characters say in the play is taken from the newspaper accounts in English from the San Francisco Call and in Hawaiian from Keʻalohi newspaper, which was Aima Nāwahī's newspaper. So I'll give a little background on the Queen's women and what I see as their legacy today. Hui Aloha o Wāhine, let's see if I can get their picture there. They were organized immediately after the Haole businessmen and the US consul, with the support of the US military, overthrew Queen Leleaʻe government in January of 1893. Their aim was to restore Leleaʻe's legitimate government. By June of 1893, they filed their protest with the US investigator, James Blount. They reported at that time that there were over 11,000 members in their hui. They submitted testimony to Blount separate from the men's Hui Aloha ʻāina. And they had this photograph taken of the executive committee at that time. The president of the hui, was Abigail Kuaihelani Campbell. She was a descendant of Kahikili, the mo'i of Maui at the time of Kamehameha. Her first husband was James Campbell, known to Kanaka as Ona Miliona, or millionaire, that he was called that affectionately. Their daughter Abigail married David Kawananakoa, and their daughter is Abigail Kawananakoa, current matriarch of the Campbell family today. Kuaihelani's right-hand woman was Emma Aima Nāwahī. She was known as the wife of Aloha ʻāina Joseph Nāwahī, but she was definitely a force in her own right. After his untimely death in September of 1896, Aima took over the newspaper Keʻalohi ʻāina as business manager, and she ran that paper until she sold it in 1910. She was a political strategist along with Kuaihelani Campbell. When the perpetrators of the overthrow planned to make themselves into a permanent government in the summer of 1894, the Wāhine Aloha ʻāina wrote to Hawaii's treaty partners, including England, France, Germany, Portugal, Japan, and even the US, pleading for assistance. They pointed out that this permanent government was based only on the support of alien bayonets. That's a quote from them. And was instituting another quote, constitution, which is acknowledged as the most illiberal and despotic ever published in civilized countries, end quote. They continued to wield their pens throughout the following years, which saw a short civil war in January in 1895, after which several hundred Kanaka, including Joseph Nāwahī and Queen Leleaʻe were arrested and tried in a military tribunal of the illegitimate so-called republic government. When Queen Leleaʻe was released in December of 1896, she immediately left Hawaii to lobby for the return of her government. She went to New York, Boston, and then settled in Washington, D.C. for several years. Aima Nāwahī became her constant correspondent. They exchanged about 300 letters between December 1896 and August 1898. After William McKinley was inaugurated as president of the US in March of 1897, the Hui Aloha ʻāina men's and women's and the Hui Ka Lei ʻāina knew that McKinley would be favorable to annexation. So Queen Leleaʻe and her secretary Joseph Helelūhe in Washington worked together with the hui here in Hawaii on strategies to try to prevent the annexation. Kuaihelani Campbell and Aima Nāwahī advised the young men who were the presidents of the men's hui. James Kaulia was president of Hui Aloha ʻāina, and David Kalauakaleni was president of Hui Ka Lei ʻāina. When the Treaty of Annexation was submitted to the US Senate, all three hui worked more or less together to mount a massive petition drive. The wording on the petitions was decided on in the executive committees, including the Mānoa of the Queen. So there were letters going back and forth, figuring out what the wording should be. So the Hui Ka Lei ʻāina chose to demand that Queen Leleaʻe government be restored, while the Hui Aloha ʻāinas protested against annexation. I don't know if you can see the lettering there, but if not, I'm sure you have other ways of looking at it. Okay, in order to get the signatures of the majority of Kanaka on the petitions, the hui held halawai maka'ainana nui, or mass meetings, in Honolulu and probably elsewhere as well. It was at this meeting on September 6, 1897, that James Kaulia said, "A'ole loa kako kala hui e ai e ho'o hui ia ko kako ʻāina me Amelika a hiki ke aloha ʻāina hope loa." Or, "We, the la hui, will never consent to annexing our ʻāina to America until the very last aloha ʻāina." They also organized themselves to send members with petitions to sign to Kauai, Maui, Molokai, and Mokuokeawe. There are already branches of the hui in many places on these islands, and people kept in touch and organized through letters and through the newspaper. In this newspaper story, they thank several people who traveled and got thousands of signatures. So this headline reads, "Hiua vela lavea lilo," which Kavenapukui translates as "strike while hot, take it away," or "win the game and take the prize." They report there that Mrs. Keikio Eva Uluko gathered over 2,000 signatures on Kauai, and Simon Kanoa gathered almost 2,000 in the Hana district alone on Maui. The prize went to Laura Mahelona, however, who cleverly dropped off blank petition pages with members of the hui along the route of a ship that went from Ka'u up to North Kona. Then she sailed back along the same route in reverse and picked up the signed pages at each harbor. The paper says that at each place she returned to, she was so covered in lei from head to foot that her clothing couldn't be seen. This was an expression of gratitude from all the aloha ʻāina in these rural places who were thankful to have a way to demonstrate their absolute opposition to annexation. Laura Mahelona was responsible for gathering over 4,000 signatures on that one trip. Kuaihelani Campbell and Aima Nāwahī also traveled to collect signatures on the petitions. The play today, as Brianna said, is based on their meeting with the Poʻe Aloha ʻāina in Hilo. But prior to that, they were welcomed with honors to Hilo. Their ship was met in the bay by a delegation of the Hilo branch of the hui. They showered them with lei, and they guided them aboard a va'akaulua so that they entered Hilo in a traditional style. 5 seats on the va'a had been decorated with maile, lehua, and other flower lei, and a high Hawaii waved at the back. When they visited Laupahoehoe, they were gifted with pails of opihi, limu, live opai, dried opai, ho'i'o, lu'au, and bundles of lei. Everywhere they went, they were hosted with feasts and more lei. This outpouring of aloha was respect for these leaders of the la hui who had dreamed up the Kūʻē petition and done the hard work of organizing and actually going out to collect signatures. It was gratitude on a grand scale for the opportunity for people outside of the political center to make their voices heard. Remember that most people had not participated in politics or government since January of 1893 because the government was not theirs. It was illegitimate and they were protesting it. They would not pay their taxes, much less vote. So decisions seemed to be made by people far away as Washington, D.C. So the Kūʻē petition was one way for our Lahui to act collectively. In the end, the Hui Aloha ʻāina petitions had over 21,000 signatures. The Hui Ka Lei ʻāina had another 17,000. The women of Hui Aloha ʻāina organized fundraisers to send for Leleaʻe to carry the Kūʻē petitions to Washington. They held luau's and they sold hat bands like this, or that it's upside down, but it says Hui Aloha. This hat band was sewn into the quilt that Leleaʻe Kahalepuna started while she was imprisoned. And I'm pretty sure it was one of the ones that were sold in that fundraiser because it was described just that way in the newspaper. These Wāhine leaders also participated in choosing who the Leleaʻe were that they were going to send. All this work was rewarded when the US Senate failed to ratify the treaty. For a moment, our Lahui felt that they had escaped the loss of their nationhood. As we know, however, the US then entered into a war with Spain in order to take its colonies in the Caribbean and in Asia. And our beloved ʻāina was taken as a tool of this war to make the US into a military superpower, along with Guam, Puerto Rico, and some other places. And then the US then embarked on a war of conquest with the Philippines, killing up to 1 million people in its quest for power and the imagined markets of Asia. A ceremony of annexation took place on the steps of Iolani Palace on August 12, 1898. The US representative handed over a copy of the Newlands Resolution, and Sanford Dole handed him a copy of the treaty that wasn't. The next day, Aima Nāwahī ran these words in Keʻalohi ʻāina newspaper, "He oia mau no kako," we go on. And they went on. Our kupuna in the 20th century suffered a lot of losses after this land grab by the US. Our islands were intentionally flooded with mostly white American settlers. The demands for a complete switch to English and the end of Olelo Hawaii were relentless. Education was meant to be American only. Many different schemes to dispossess Kanaka from our lands were invented and laws passed to make them legal. The US military took over thousands of acres of our ʻāina and destroyed fish ponds, streams, lo'i, and other means by which we used to feed ourselves. They're still doing this. But they went on, and a significant dedicated group of people in every generation took care of the ʻāina wherever they could. Some made sure that Ike Hawaii wasn't lost by writing down what they knew and publishing it in the new Pepa Olelo Hawaii. Some made sure, like my great uncle, to teach his keiki and mo'opuna Olelo Hawaii. And generation after generation, they filed lawsuits to try to hold on to their ʻāina. They organized themselves into civic clubs, ali'i societies, and so on to perpetuate Loina Hawaii and provide assistance to each other. The switch to English and to American-only education, however, meant that the 20th century generations lost access to the history of this fight against annexation. Our kupuna and makua were taught that Kanaka Hawaii did not put up a fight at all. And it's because of those who fought to keep teaching the language and the kupuna that preserved their copies of the new Pepa that I was able to read and retrieve their stories. I remember that on August 11th, 1998, the day before the 100-year commemoration of the annexation, a woman at the Capitol clutched her copy shop copy of the petitions to her chest and told me, "Now we will never forget again." This is just a small but significant restoration of our true history of struggle. It's not just the petition itself that is significant. It is the mana'o of those kupuna, the mele they composed, the way they called themselves names like William Aloha ʻāina and Nā Kiaʻi Naue Ole, the immovable kiaʻi. That's a 19th century name. How they tattooed Aloha ʻāina on their chests, and especially the ways that they organized. Don't think that it was easy. They didn't all agree. James Kaulia and David Kaleni got plenty scoldings from their anti-leaders, Aima and Kuaihelani. And there were misunderstandings too. Kaulia was denounced in Kaloea Kalaiʻaina newspaper for attending the speech of the annexation as Senator John Morgan. But when they put aside these disagreements and insults to get the work done, they got it done. We are their mamo. We see the new Alakai and the Kukia Imona movement. There are young ones like Kaho'okahi Kanuha and Lanakila Mangawul and Havani Rios and many other young ones. I don't have time to put everyone up here. But then there's the aunties and the Kupuna Wahine leaders. There's Kumupua Case and Kumu Noi Noi Wong Wilson. She's being arrested right there. Kumupua Leni Kanaka Ole Kanahele. And then you can see her surrounded with Noi Noi Wong Wilson and Kalekoa Ka'eo. And Auntie Maxine, Kahaule Leo, and so many more, and plenty uncles too, and Kupuna Kane. Like I said, there's just too many to name them all. So we also don't always agree with each other, but when it comes to defending the land, we're sometimes able to put aside our disagreements and do the work of organizing. When we do, it's beautiful. I was so heartened to see people on the Mauna who are on opposite sides of the federal recognition question, for example. And I don't think we should stop disagreeing. We all have to use our brains and disagree when we think something's not pono. But we've been inspired by the ability of our kupuna to work together when necessary to protect the ʻāina. Joseph Navahi's last words to his lahui were, "E ho'omaui ke kupaʻai ke aloha I ka ʻāina." And I think he would be proud to know that we are doing just that. Mahalo.
Mahalo e noi noi. I want to again remind our audience to please send in any questions or save them for the end. But I want to keep us going, and with that, I'd like to play our reenactment.
She wrote the article on September 22nd, 1897, on the deck of the passenger ship Australia, on her way home to San Francisco.
The strongest memories I have of these islands is of the meeting house of the Salvation Army in Hilo on the island of Hawaii. It was a small, crude place, enough for 300, I believe. Bare rafters could be seen overhead, and the bare walls were much improved with biblical teachings in English and Hawaiian.
Mai kaina ia o iho no ka la'apopo.
Don't boast about yourself for tomorrow.
Ma waho ai o Karisto, a ole he ho'ola.
Without Christ, there is no salvation. As I entered, the bell of the foreign church standing atop the beautiful bluff in Hilo rang 10 times. This place was filled with Hawaiian people, and those who could not come inside were standing outside patiently. This meeting was conducted by women, but nevertheless, several groups of men were there. The women were dressed in Mother Hubbard-style dresses and wore white and black sailor hats. The men wore coats and wore pants that were much like those of the Americans. Then the multitude of people separated, and two tall women entered, dressed in black clothing. They wore black kid gloves and black hats decorated with black feathers. The slightly taller of the two had a noble, dignified demeanor of a queen. Red roses encircled the top of her hat. And on her neck and breast was a lei, expertly made with flowers, woven with the leaves of the palapalei fern. She was Mrs. Kuaihelani Campbell, president of Hui Hawaii Aloha ʻāina o Navahine. Her companion was the secretary of the group's branch, Mrs. Emma Nāwahī. There are 100,000 people on these islands. Of them, not 3% have declared for annexation. To these natives, this loss of nationality is hateful, aberrant. It is the old battle. White man against brown, might against right, strength against weakness, power and intellect and art against docility, inertia, and simplicity. A man suffering from an acute attack of annexation mania said to me, "I tell the natives who work for me, might as well walk into the sea and try to push out the incoming wave with your uplifted hands as to try to prevent what's coming." It's a question of conquest, I admit. We are stronger and we will win. It's the survival of the fittest. He was a tall, majestic, handsome-faced man. 3/4 haole, as they say here. His hands were tightly gripped in front of him as he looked over the bowed heads before him and gave a few short words of prayer for the opening.
Ta'olelo Yehowa. Imailo o Yehowa ya Mose. Pehea la kalo ihi o kaho o nahu kiuki ana mai o ki ipo e Kanaka ia. Ahea la ho i la ho e mana o I o mi e ia no na mea mana pau wa ui o I kei I wai no la ho.
There's something impressive in strong prayers spoken in an unfamiliar language. You do not hear the words, but the tones. He was appealing to them with his feelings, not his intellect. And with that, the minister's voice ended.
Amen.
And the audience replied,
Amen.
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 I watched Mrs. Nāwahī with curiosity when she stood and spoke to the people. I had never seen two women speak to the multitudes in this way. Would this Hawaiian woman be embarrassed, timid, or self-conscious? None of these things. Her candid manner reminded me of Charlotte Perkins Stetson's 2 years ago, the most interesting speaker of the Women's Congress. The thoughts of the Hawaiian women were of her subject, not of herself. This pleasing manner of speaking compelled me to look at her. While The person translating for me by my side whispered her translation to me, all the while the words were being spoken.
He la hui nā wali wali kākou, ka poʻe Hawaiiʻi. A ole hoʻi o kākou I kaika, koe wale no ko kākou lo kahilike. O Amerika kui puia, he ʻāina kuʻokoʻa ia. O nā kanaka o Laila, he mau hoaloha hoʻi, ka la hui nā wali wali. E hōʻike aku kākou iā lākou. E hoʻomā ike kākou iā lākou. E like me ko lākou aloha I ko lākou ʻāina. A awamo I ka eha ma mua o ka hāʻawi ana aku. Pēlā no ko kākou aloha I ko kākou ʻāina. E nonoi aku. A ole lākou e lawe mai iā kākou aku. Ko kākou mana olana. E ia ke kū nei. Me ke kū paa he poʻohiwi me ke poʻohiwi. He puʻuwai me ka puʻuwai. O ka leo nā kānaka. Ka leo no ia o ke akua. He oia iʻo e lohe ana ka ʻāina ma ke lā au o ka moana I ko kākou leo ualo. E wawalo e hele aku ai a e lohe lākou. Ma ke ia palapala kākau I noa ana mai I ke ia la. O oe e ka wahine o Hawaiiʻi. Ua loaʻa iā oe he wā e noʻonoʻo ai. Ka palapala o nā kāne o hoʻouna ia mai ana no ia. E ka hui o nā kāne I ka wā e pau ai I ke kākau I noa ia. A ole ke ia he mau hana epa. A ole hoʻi he hoʻopuni ma ko kākou alahele o ka hana. O ke ia wale no ko kākou alahele e hakakā ai. E ike nā mea a pau. A e hoʻomaupopo I ko kākou palapala hoʻopiʻi. No kākou ke ia ʻāina. O ia ko kākou Hawaiiʻi.
Pololei, aloha ʻāina.
Aloha ʻāina. Ai, pololei.
Pēhea. E hoʻonele ia ane I ko kākou lāhui.
A ole loa. Never. Never.
E hoʻohui ia ane I kākou me Amerika.
A ole loa. A ole loa. Never ia. Never.
At this time, the minister introduced a woman, Mrs. Campbell, to the audience. She spoke with pleasant smiles. The men and women stamped in approval and cheered. She spoke only a few words filled with hope. She sometimes seemed as if she were persuading them all to trust her with sincerity and generosity of voice. As she leaned forward and said,
E kupa'a e ku'u mau aloha. O ke aloha I ka ʻāina, he mea nui ia ia oe a mea u. Ma mua o nā mea a pau.
Ai, pololei.
Aloha ʻāina. Aloha ʻāina.
E koa, e ikaika, e vivo ole me ka hoʻomanawa nui. E hiki mai ana ko kākou wā e kākau inoa ai I ke ia palapala hoʻopiʻi. Nā poʻe I aloha ia Hawaiiʻi. E hia la e kākau inoa ana.
Na'u e pulima. Me. Na'u no e pulima. Me. I will. Me. I will.
She waved her gloved hands, and immediately hundreds of hands turned to her. Dark hands with short fingers and worn fingernails. They showed of poverty and of work, of contact with the land that they claimed.
Eia he mea kakau nu pepa I ane'i. E olelo aku iaia I ko oko mana'o. A laila, e ike mai na Amerika. Malia o ho'olohe mai lākou.
What is it? What did she say?
She says, here's a writer for the newspaper. She tells the people, tell her your feelings. Then America will know, and perhaps they will listen.
Then something amazing happened. The men and women all stood up one by one and spoke a few words of faith.
Eia no ko'u mana'o. My opinion, this is my feeling. I love my land and I want to be independent from now to forever.
I. Aloha ui kuʻāina. I love this land. I don't want to be annexed. This is a land where I was born, and I love it just as the American loves his. Would he want to be annexed by another larger land? Ole.
Ole. No, of course not.
I am very strongly opposed to annexation. How dare the Americans rob our people of their independence? I want the American government to do the correct thing. America helped to overthrow Leleaʻe Kahalepuna. She must be restored as our queen. We will never consent to annexation.
Give us our queen! No annexation! We want our queen!
I have an American father and a pure Hawaiian mother. It is the land of my mother that I love. America has performed an unjust act. How could we love America?
Ai, pololei, aloha ʻāina.
Let them see their wrongdoings and restore the queen. If the great nations were fair, they would never take our land. I will never consent to annexation.
Ai, pololei.
Ai, pololei, never.
Say to America, I don't want annexation. I want my beloved queen.
Ew. Oppose annexation.
That speaker, she is a good woman. She is a Christian, an honest person, kind, and charitable.
I oppose annexation. Me and my entire family.
We
want our queen.
I am speaking for the people behind of me. They cannot enter, therefore they cannot speak. They told me to say, no annexation, never.
Leo, aloha ʻāina. Aloha ʻāina. O kauhi koʻu inoa. O Kaloa. Kahikapa ia o Hilovaina. I am Kohi of Kaloa, the place we call Hilovaina. Our group has 300 members. They have sent me here. We really oppose annexation. All of us. E kupaʻa kākou.
Oppose annexation.
I love my land and oppose annexation. We look to America as our friend. Let her not be our enemy.
I am telling you the truth. The great majority of the people on Molokai strongly oppose annexation. They are fearful that if annexed to America, their lands will be lost. The foreigners will gather the benefits and Hawaiians will be put in a worse position than they are today.
Ai, pololei. I am a mail carrier. Come with me to my district and I will show you 2,000 Hawaiians who oppose annexation. We all stand to show our love for our country and our Hawaiian flag, not the American flag. E kūʻē ka hohui ʻāina.
Ew! Oppose annexation!
Eyo! Oppose annexation!
Aye. Give us our queen. No annexation.
Aye. Pololei. Aloha ʻāina.
Eyo! Aloha ʻāina.
Pololei. Aloha ʻāina.
Iku mama, ikua! Iku mama, ikululu, ikala na wo! Ikua! Ikula na wo!
Ikua!
Ikua ki, ikua ko, ikua mo, amo kai ulu, ikua! Iku mama!
Ikua!
hukie kulia.
E hukie
Kulia.
E hukie
Kulia.
Hawaii ponoi nana I ko moi kalani ali ke ali makualani e kameha meha e na kaua e pale me ka ihe avai ponoi nana I na ali na pua muliko na poki makualani e kamehameha e na kaua e pale me ka ihe Havai ponoi e kalahui e o kauhana nui e ui e makualani e kameha meha e na kaua e pale me ka ihe.
I think we're all maybe taking some deep breaths. And while we're still hearing the poo, I'm going to invite our honored guests and speakers to turn on your folks' videos so we can transition into sharing about what we saw together. We have some really beautiful things in the chat. I know we can't applaud. There's over 100 folks here, and so try to imagine that that lehu lehu and that applause. And if you want to put some thoughts in the chat now, folks, go ahead. I'm going to read out some because I think not everyone can see. Didi would love this. Mahalo. Mahalo for such an interesting presentation. Noi noi, much aloha. Stirring and important. Great job. All. Mahalo for that wonderful display and reenactment of Aloha ʻāina from the whole Osorio Ohana. And these are from different folks who are with us today. Wonderful, thank you. So there's silence in my house. There's so much applause here on the chat. Oh, okay. So I'm gonna just be helping introduce some of our folks we have with us here today so that we can go a little bit deeper into what we watched. And please continue to put some questions in the chat because we're going to try to get to as much as we can. Wonderful, Vikio. Is there a recording that can be shared? Okay, we're going to get to these questions in a second. Oh, beautiful, emotional, heavy. Okay, before we do that, we want to go to Kumu Hailiʻōpua Baker, our director, the woman leader teacher who helped to create what we just saw today. Kumu Hailiʻōpua Baker is about world making and universe making. She's an associate professor of theater and the Hawaiian Theatre Program director at UH Mānoa, where she teaches Hawaiian theater and language, Pacific and Indigenous theater and playwriting. And many of you here today are probably already familiar with her work and how she's bringing and creating and making space for an Indigenous Hawaiian theater aesthetic, an Indigenous Hawaiian theater form, always pushing for Hawaiian language revitalization and creating space for that, and how cultural identity can be empowered through these amazing stage performances. And you go and you see this whole rich world full of people, full of, you know, so many people, and you believe. And then I think those worlds, like they gain foothold and just get stronger. Kumu Haili helped to establish the MFA in Hawaiian Theater in 2014 and has led a number of main stage productions. The most recent one, Aʻāʻia, went to New York. You guys did, yeah, right before the pandemic started. Also is the artistic director of Kahalau Hana Keaka, the Hawaiian Medium Theater Troupe. And I'm going to put the link so you can learn more about them if you don't know more. I'm going to put that in the chat. And Kumu Haili is such an amazing artist, building practitioners, building capacity, building community, building ono for these world-changing, world-making productions. So it's so much grace and aloha. I'm so glad you could join us, Kumu Haili, to share about what it was like, the process of making this thing. And I remember coming to you with this idea, you know, when we first talked about this idea, and we were like, I don't know, can we do this? And can we do this in a couple months? And you said, can. And you said, what an honor to help to carry this story. And then you folks did it. So please, if you could share with us a little bit about what that was like.
Yeah, aloha pumehana kako. Ho'omaka wau me na mahalo. Mahalo ya olua e Aiko La'ua Brianna for inviting me to be a part of this project. And mahalo ya oi e noi noi. E ka lehua I ka moi I ke alahele ka lai ʻāina o ke iaone o ka mahele ake aka mai. Your research and scholarship has truly opened up paths for us as Kanaka Maoli to reclaim our history and to further our understanding. I remember us in the early 90s going to Hui Kamaʻilio, to Hoʻikaika and Hoʻoma'ama'a, our Olelo Hawaii skills. And I just wanted to say that tonight I am moved by the impact of your work. For what we shared here tonight, the play, these mo'olelo, were made possible because of your research and scholarship. Mahalo nui ya oi ke hoa. Mahalo no ho'i ya Lynette for agreeing to our exploration of reimagining Didi's play, Ka Lei Maile Aliʻi, for the digital platform. And our COVID times. Mahalo anui e nā hoa a me nā haumana I komo pu I ke ia papahana. Much gratitude to my colleagues and students who answered the call to be a part of this production. My first contact with this material was as an audience member in 2001 when I experienced one of the earliest iterations of Ka Lei Maile Aliʻi. The memory of audience engagement and how we were moved by the words of Aima Nāwahī and Kuaihelani Campbell was the guiding light for this adaptation. I wanted to make sure that the leo, the voice, and the words of our kupuna were the most salient aspects of this production. So as you see, no period costumes, no fancy props, no set design or fancy lighting effects. The actors were asked to simply embody the text. They emoted and communicated the intentions of those words. And that engagement with the text was the engagement with mo'olelo, which was also the engagement with our kupuna and their experiences. And that manifests itself into engagement with us, the audience. So even through a digital platform, the leo, the voice, and the words have touched us. Mahalo once again for being a part of this and allowing us to have some agency in retelling this story and taking this and being able to give it to the next generation. Most of the haumana that worked on this project have never heard of Ka Lei Maile Aliʻi. And so this was a way to open up another conversation. Many of them were familiar, of course, with the Kūʻē petitions and familiar with a lot of the research that has come and are very active in the community, especially in the most recent Kukia I Mauna and the movement with Mauna Kea. But this was a way of maybe giving one more layer, one more lens to that particular mo'olelo and another experience of that mo'olelo. So, oia I hola, mahalo, mahalo.
Mahalo, mahalo nui. There's more things happening in the chat. I don't think everybody can see, but folks are writing. Aloha aina oia i'o, nani loa, mahalo, aloha aina. So please keep writing stuff in. Mahalo for this wonderful eye-opening program and the dramatic presentation of the struggle against annexation. The struggle continues. There's lots of things happening in there. And if you have questions too that you want folks to address, we're collecting them. So keep putting them in there. Our next honored guest is Emilia Kandagawa, who's a member of Hui Aloha Aino Ka Lei Maile Aliʻi, the group that first birthed this production in 2001 in community spaces, this historical reenactment, and they continue to take this drama throughout Kapai Aina and invite community to be in engagement with those leo and those kupuna and these stories. So I'm really happy that Emilia could come in the stead of Lynette Cruz today. Emilia is you're such a strong and beautiful aloha aina artist, poet, and healer, and really would welcome you now to share your thoughts on what you saw, but also what you folks do and what happens when these voices are in community spaces, when this drama is shared in those spaces, and your intentions for that.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here with all of you and to see the culmination of all the hard work that you put in over such a, long but also short amount of time. And so I was thinking of, Hailey, when you were brought up the first performance in 2001, and the fact that, nobody wanted to leave. There's supposed to be 2 acts, 2 showings, and nobody wanted to leave because of how powerful these words really are and how powerful it is to embody them and to give them new life. And, so the play came before Ka Lei Maile Aliʻi as an organization in 2003. Because of this reenactment is when we formed ourselves as a Hawaiian Civic Club. And we remained a Hawaiian Civic Club until 2016 when we reformed ourselves as a branch of Hui Aloha Aina. And so throughout those years, we've combined the reenactment alongside the Kūʻē petition name signs project. And both of those together have formed a kind of core of the work that we've done in connecting people to history, to the ancestors, and has been a kind of like a happy combination of gut level education, but also head level, because we love our head candy stuff. We love hearing the research and new history coming out of UH and other places. We love all of those things, and it's good to have that information, to have that clarity of the truth of history. But it's also the kind of thing that you gotta engage with at a gut level. Because when we hand out those parts, the audience parts, and including in the cast member parts too, you are not playing a role. Like, you are them, you become them. There's no accidents in the people who pick up those scripts and those roles. There are all sorts of like ho'ailona that come through every single time that it's done. It doesn't matter if it's a huge production like the very first one. All the details to the T are set up, or if it's just a simple like reading in a classroom for folks who have never seen it before, it still has impact. And it's a kind of like reclaiming space is the term that we've come to use, is like reclaiming space, not just in a physical way, like when we take the reenactment, or we take those Kūʻē name sign petitions to physical places of importance, but it's reclaiming space in the mental landscape too, as well as the physical. And so the petitions themselves, the success of these thousands of kupuna who defeated a treaty of annexation, it's a call to action for us to align ourselves with what is true, with what is just, and how we address life under occupation today, to aloha ʻāina in all the ways, to kukia imona in all the ways, because this movement in particular for Mauna Kea has been one of these like pivotal ushering in of a new era, a new moment for all of us. And I said a couple of days ago when we were talking, and I was thinking like this for me personally is looking at the work that you've done is a kind of listening training for me. I think that the pandemic has given us a really important moment to really practice our listening skills and really practice what it is to be in stillness, and what is there for us to receive in those moments of stillness. And I think it's in some ways like this reenactment is maybe like function over form in some ways, that our ancestors like find ways to use us to get their message out, even in with the limitations that we have. So here we are doing it virtually, but the point is to attune ourselves to that vibration, to the vibration of these words that were spoken, the exact words that were spoken in 1897, the exact feeling that was there, and to embody that, and to receive their direction, like to be good listeners in order to receive the good direction that we're being called to embody aloha ʻāina in whatever way that and in whatever way that means for us. That could be aloha ʻāina on the ground planting taro. That could be aloha ʻāina on the ground clearing, California grass. That could be aloha ʻāina in the way that we speak to each other, and the way that we hold space for each other, and the way that we just witness each other's struggle, and especially COVID time. Like this is a huge pivotal historic moment. And so the play is beyond us, and I just want to put the invitation out there that anybody can do this. Anybody has done this. We've done this play across the islands. We've done it in California. We've done it all over. So if anybody wants the script is free, and we give it freely because that's what needs to be done. And I'm just happy to see what you folks have poured your heart in to give this life in this moment. And I'm sure there's lots of impact that will be felt that we might not even see, we might not even know about, but to put it out there is so valuable.
Well, and folks are writing, I'd love to see the script. And so we'll find a way to share that. I know this recording will be shared too, and what a huge invitation to hold these leo and to take them and to take these kupuna and to carry them, and the impact will continue to ripple beyond and beyond.
Do it at home. Do it in your, if you can do it in person, find your people that's, you know, that you can gather with. Make it small if you need to make it small, but go do them.
Mahalo, mahalo, Emilia. Emilia's sticking around, so if you have questions for her about that amazing work that their Hui does, please go ahead and put them in. Continue to put them in the chat too, and then you can check out their Facebook page for more calls to action and information about the work with the name cards as well, and reclaiming those spaces. This is a really perfect segue into our two celebrities, our two participants, our two cast members in the reenactment that you just saw. We have two folks here today who are going to share about what it felt like to embody these mo'olelo and kupuna, and to bring these leo to life and give their own life and connect their own lives to this story. So we're really happy to have Kaipulau Makani Olono and Hilani Kim de la Cruz Okimura, who we would like to invite now to share just what this was like for you, your personal experience and the meaning and things you're thinking about. So maybe Kaipu, would you like to start us?
Yeah, I'm Ko'oleo mua he leo mahalo. I Brianna me Aiko no ka Ho'olauka'i ana ke papahana. Ana ke Didi no ka haku ana ke Hana Keaka. Oi kumunoi no kau noi'i. Kau hana nui no ka make ana kukako la hui. Me ku'uhaku o Hailiʻōpua. Mahalo nui oi no ke alaka'i ana mai kia papahana. He leo mahalo no ho'ike I ke anaina holoko'a I haiamu maila I ka zoo I low akula paha I ka YouTube ke aloha nui o ko pakaia pau and maka ki e kelepona na maka halo loloila ke aloha nui kako. I don't know what much more I can add to the brilliance that was already shared this evening. But just building off of one thing that Emilia said, that, you know, when we Hana Keaka, when we take the words of our kupuna, we're not playing a role. And I love that idea. It's the, we empty ourselves so that their will and their olelo can flow through us. And I think that is very powerful, because especially when we're championing these moments of victory, and we're carrying their leo that led our people to lei ka lei o Kalanakila in shutting down the so-called Treaty of Annexation. And so we know, and it gives it sets the stage for, you know, Keanusai's work at with the Geneva Convention, and proving that, you know, we are actually still technically a sovereign nation under international law, and we know that we are in the right, and we know that we have access to our ʻāina, and we know that we are the only people who can claim true sovereignty, true autonomy on our ʻāina is Kanaka Maoli. And so when you know that, then everything, at least personally for me, kind of makes sense in a way that, you know, we gotta work with our ohana, with our community, with members of our lahui. And every time we get together, every time we have some sort of a kuka, every time we have a community gathering, every time you know, the kolo akanaio calls us to ku'e something, and kukulu other things for the pono of our lahui. We know that what we're organizing, what we're building, is our ea, is our autonomy as a lahui. And so I think it's really important that we recognize that every breath we take, every step we take, and I know that's one song, but we are moving somewhere as a lahui. We are organizing, and we are, you know, plotting together a sovereign and deoccupied future. And because we know where we come from, that's how we know where we're going. Because we know that even though we won that one, we still caught little bit lickings in the early 1900s. And then we beat the Navy with Kaho'olawe. And then they still, settler colonialism works in mysterious ways, not so mysterious. They're actually destroying in order to replace, but we know that we continuously have to fight these, all these kind of stuff. And just because you write doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get what's due to you. And so that's why we need to continue to organize, continue to leave ourselves open to the guidance of our kupuna. And this brings me back to, my original point that, be open to their voices, because they got our backs. And when they make us meet somebody, or when they bring you into, say, a Hana Keaka program, like my colleague over here, my classmate Hiilani, or when they bring you to the Mauna, or when they bring you to, say Key Project or anywhere in our communities, that your kupuna was guiding you for something better for you personally, our lahui. It's all a learning experience. And knowing the words of our ancestors and knowing that we are continually organizing to reassert our independence, I think is really the thing that I learned from Hana Keaka and reciting the words of our ancestors. So mahalo nui to everybody who organized this, and mahalo nui to our fellow Kanaka in the audience and across the honua. He oia mauno kako.
Mahalo Kaipu. I love that. Your kupuna got your back, so listen to them. Hiilani, would love to hear your thoughts as well on what it felt like for you.
Mahalo, beautifully said, Kaipu. That was beautiful. And I also want to mahalo you, Aiko, and Brianna for putting this together. Mahalo, Kumunoinoi Silva, for the beautiful presentation in the beginning to just give more ike to what we just saw. And mahalo Kumu Hailiʻōpua for asking me to, she pulled us after class and was like, hey, I'm directing this. Would you like to be part of it? I'm like, of course. Of course. So mahalo. And mahalo, Amelia, for coming here and sharing your mana'o as well. What you said, I actually wrote down what you said because it really resonated with me, how our ancestors find ways to really channel us and to tell us where we need to go and what we need to do. And this actually reminded me, after Kumu Hailiʻōpua and I, when we recorded my parts for this, we had a conversation just about the Kūʻē petitions. And she mentioned to me that they actually created a big book that compiles all of them. So I'm still looking for that. But it was, to put it simply, I did feel like my kupuna were with me during this. And like Kaipu says, I am a newer student in the Hawaiian Theatre Program. I entered UH Mānoa just, doing theater because it's what I love to do. It's what I'm passionate about. And then after being exposed to Hana Keaka and what it is and the purpose behind it, which is to empower our lahui, to tell our stories from our perspectives, I felt that voice to me, you have to do this. And at first, I was a little scared at first because I'm still learning Olelo Hawaii. I'm still a new student to it, but Kumu Hailiʻōpua, Kaipu, and everyone in the Hawaiian Theatre Program have been nothing but just supportive and loving, and it just feels like this is where I need to be. And just the online theater medium, it is, we've been doing this for a year, so it still feels a little interesting. I mean, I would have loved to have seen this on stage, in person, and I would love maybe in the near future that we could make this reenactment again, on stage, because I mean, the digital one was very beautiful, and this was all of our first time seeing it and just empowering. And after watching this, just made me kind of remind myself why I'm doing this and why I'm here. But even so, like even through the digital, even though we were on Zoom, I still felt like my ancestors coming to me and telling me this is the story, this is why you need to do it. And yeah, I don't know, I think Kaipu said like everything just perfectly, where it's like, it doesn't matter if it's on stage or through Zoom, like it's our kuleana. And I was very happy and I'm very privileged to be part of this experience. So mahalo.
Mahalo for sharing, Hi'ilani, and I love that you shared, you know, there's this nervousness, but then here's this hui around me with who is so supportive, and it was reminding me of what Emilia was sharing too about here are these hui of kupuna, and then like these hui of people are birthing more hui, right? It's like these groups, it's not just anyone alone, but all of these groups of amazing, powerful people are creating more groups of amazing, powerful people. And then it's all getting connected, and it's so stunning to see. People are still writing in the chat, oh, such a great job, Hi'ilani and Kaipu. Mahalo, mahalo nui. And Brianna, I don't know if folks are writing in questions in the Q&A, which I'm not looking at the separate Q&A, but I think we're getting ready to transition there. But before we do that, I wanted to come back to Kumunoinoi Silva and invite you, if you wanted to share any thoughts after we watch this together and hearing all of these folks speak and share their mana'o. Also, I know there's a group question of, can you take us to that moment of being in the archives and finding these inoa, and you know, what was that like?
Mahalo. Well, first of all, I just think that the adaptation of the play to this medium was just done so well. It just seemed like such a daunting thing to try to do. And when the play was originally done, and I think in most of the times that you folks are continuing to do it, Emilia, it's not so much on stage. It's like the people who are responding are actually seated in the audience. And so it's it really feels like you're there. It doesn't feel like there's a stage over there where people are doing something and you're just watching, because the person next to you is going to stand up and say, I can tell you everybody on Molokai is opposed to annexation, right? So it's a powerful experience, but it's also a really powerful adaptation that you folks put together. And every time I see this, I cry. So just hearing those words spoken and knowing that they're the actual words that are Kupuna spoke, and they're still speaking. They're speaking through you folks when you do this. So I think that's about all I have to say thank you again to everybody. It's just beautifully done. And I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any. I think actually when it was starting, somebody asked about the Hui Ka Lei ʻāina petitions, if they had ever been found. Actually, I only saw a portion of the question, but I think that's what it was. And the answer is no. So the story is, so they took them to Washington. There was a group of 4 alele that took both petitions. So there were two from Hui Ka Lei ʻāina and 2 from Hui Aloha. And they went up there and they took them. But then when they got up there, they realized that because Hui Ka Lei ʻāina's had a different text than Hui Aloha. So there were 2 different texts. So that's when they decided, okay, we're going to submit one, and then they put in an affidavit. So David Kaleni submitted an affidavit, said, you know, my group represents 17,000 more signatures. And then what did they do with them? I don't know. That's a big bunch of paper to carry home. Maybe they didn't carry it home. I looked. There was one Senator Pettigrew who had met with them, and I contacted the museum that has his papers in South Dakota, and it wasn't in his papers. So It's just never been found, but we know it existed. There's plenty documentation, you know, in the newspapers. So there's no doubt about its existence. It's just we don't have the actual signatures. Just one last thing about that. So for people who are looking for their kupuna signatures and they don't find them on the Hui Aloha ʻāinas, they probably signed the Hui Ka Lei ʻāinas. Some people signed both, maybe, I don't know, but many people only signed the one. They were two distinct huis. So.
Mahalo. I think Brianna is still checking. Oh, something came in. Any other senators or representatives checked from Christiana?
No, I think that he was the only one that was their actual friend in Washington. So that was the only one I checked. But, you know, research is never po. So, you know, another researcher may find some other avenues to try.
And Kumanoinoi, sorry to repeat that, when these petitions were rediscovered, was that a direct, you know, was it kind of this obvious path, or did, you know, what was it?
The story was that I was already researching the Hui Aloha ʻāina, and I was just formulating my dissertation research, what my topic was going to be. And so I was reading the Keʻalohi ʻāina newspaper, and I knew who they were, and I knew that there was already a struggle against annexation, but I didn't know about the petitions, and I actually didn't know what had happened in 1897 yet. I was reading the newspaper like chronologically, and I wasn't reading a history book because the stories are not actually told well in our history books, so that was a waste of time anyway. Anyway, so one day I walked into the Hawaii State Archives, and I went up to the desk, and one of the archivists was looking at a booklet from the National Archives, and it was called something like Diverse Communities in American Life. It was an exhibit that the National Archives had put on. They have a little gallery in the front of the archives, and they had one like unique thing from every state in that exhibit and in this booklet. And so in the booklet, it had a picture of some surfers on Kauai, and it had a picture of a page of the women's Kūʻē petition. And so he just was looking at that page, and he looked up at me and he's like, "You do Hawaiian stuff, yeah?" And I'm looking around like I'm in the archives, like everybody in here does. What else are you doing in the archives? But anyway, I was like, "Yes." And he says, "Have you seen this?" And I looked at it and I was like, "Oh my God." I was like, "I don't know what this is, but I know who they are." And so I don't know, I can't remember if I photocopied it or I just wrote it down. And then a couple months later, by coincidence, I got to go to Washington, DC. So my partner at the time, her sister was moving back, and their aunties got together and gave us frequent flyer miles. And so we went to Washington, DC to help her sister pack and then have a little vacation. So I went to the National Archives armed with my little information from this little exhibit booklet. And then it took a while, but they finally brought out the box, which was the entire proceedings of the 55th Congress. Everything from the Foreign Relations Committee of the 55th Congress was in one box. And most of that box was these petitions. So that was how I saw it. And then I just photocopied a few pages. And then later on, when I got home, after talking to a couple of people, I realized I needed all the pages. So I sent them a check, and they took 3 months to photocopy it. And then I was just sitting at work one day in my office in Spalding, and this package arrived like this. And I ripped it open, and I was like, "Oh my God, here's all 550 pages. So that was how it arrived.
What an amazing story, and also hearkening back to what folks have been sharing about becoming good listeners and following, these little moments and these little openings that maybe kupuna are leaving for us. Wow.
Yeah, they just handed it to me. Like the guy was just there and he's like, here, have you seen this?
And again, the chat is filling up on our end. I know not all the attendees can see, but folks are writing, mahalo nui loa for a beautiful reenactment and adaptation. It was so powerful and confirms what we need to do as Kanaka. I'm so grateful for the Zoom event. Mahalo piha. I cried as I watched with my daughters. I appreciate all the commentary Mana'o shared, as well as the panelists' commitment to our lahui. Ke aloha, mahalo ku'ulei, and lots more notes like that coming in too. Mahalo nui. Okay, I think we're getting to the end of our scheduled time, Brianna. So I want to turn it back to you to help us close a little bit.
I just want to say mahalo to all of you. I'm so honored to be sharing this space right now tonight with not only our panelists, but the attendees here. And my heart is so full. I know we tried to do this program a year ago, and then COVID-19 shut us down. And initially, there was a little reluctance to doing things virtually, but as this is now our new normal for the foreseeable future, we rallied together and tried to do the best we can. And I think we did that. I think we achieved what we set out to do. And under Kumu Hailey's direction, I'm really just in awe in what we were able to produce in such a short time. And I'm so thankful. So again, mahalo. And with that, if what was shared tonight inspired you, I really want to invite our attendees to connect and reflect and go deeper in a writing workshop, creative writing workshop that the History Center is going to be offering on Saturday, April 17th from 10 a.m. to 11:30 with Dr. No'u Ravilla. And this is a free creative writing workshop centered around the power of one's inoa. And in that workshop, writers are going to be encouraged to consider the history and power of their names. Where does your name come from? Where does it push you? How has your name marked or impacted your actions, beliefs, and relationships? And I'm going to share a link to our post-event survey, which I would love for everyone here tonight to fill out. It's just a quick survey. And in that, there's also the registration link to attend that workshop if you're interested. And there's also educational resources in there. We have Noinoi's book, and we also have in the survey a link to purchase the recent publication Kūʻē Petitions, Amauloa Akuno. And that was published by Kyle Press in partnership with the Friends of the Judiciary History Center of Hawaii. And it features full-size color images of all of the petitions. Actually, I have a copy right next to me here. It is, oh no, you can't see because my virtual background. Here we go. It is huge, beautiful, unbelievable treasure of a book. So I'm so happy we're able to, oh, thank you. There we go. Fantastic. Yeah, it's just so beautiful. I don't have any more to add. I just mahalo to everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone's reactions, responses, comments, sharing in the chat. And Aiko, would you mind sharing the meeting link again? I'll keep this the webinar open for a few more minutes so people can go in and click the links that we share.
Sure. Okay. So I'm going to put in the chat again. I know folks are going to go, you're going to go to your other things and to your families, and you're going to reenact this at home, like Amelia said. But if you want to hang out for a little bit more, what I'm going to do is I'm putting the link in the chat for, we're going to hold a space open for just a little bit longer in a separate room, where if you want to be with all the over 100 folks who are with us, if you just want to be with some other people and share a little bit more, then we welcome you to have that space together. So that link that I just put in is for that community session if you want to hang out for a little bit longer. And oh, mahalo nui to our amazing speakers. I invite you guys to unmute just to so we can hear your leo again, and send us off, send this webinar home. Mahalo for all the mana'o shared about listening and about speaking and about standing for what you believe in and coming together as hui again and again and again. And in this way, to the best way to care for all that we love. Really appreciate everything shared, so inspiring. And invite you folks to say any quick goodbyes or ahui hos as we, yeah, we will meet again. Aloha, folks.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Mahalo nui.
Mahalo nui to everybody who attended.